Sorry for the delay, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to our first event of the series on civil rights then and now that's happening here at First Immanuel Lutheran Church. A special welcome to any guests or visitors that are joining us today online, and thank you to those who are also here in person from the congregation. It's an honor to be here with you all as we begin this series on civil rights then and now. Celebrating First Immanuel's rich history of racial integration and activism during the civil rights movement, and also working together to think about what it might mean to be a church concerned about civil rights today. So this is our first event. Again, this is our panel discussion asking the question and we're exploring what civil rights was then in some ways. And so we're going to hear, we have four wonderful panelists from our congregation, past and present members, to talk about their experience in the congregation, especially around the areas of 1950 to 1970, to talk about the congregation's racial integration, to talk about civil rights activism, and also just to talk about the history of this church, this community, the wonderful gifts that it brings and has been to so many people for so many years. So we have with us as our panelist, just very quickly, and Mr. Art Sims, our moderator, will introduce us a little bit more, but Ms. Carolyn Becker, Mr. George Manning II, Ms. Betty Stanfield, and Mr. Tyrone Wallace is here with us today. Yes, and applause is always welcome. For you, those in the chat, we will try to pass along some applause and celebrations also. We have some go-betweens in between our online world and our in-person world here. So feel free to share those celebrations. We'll try to get them out to our panelists here today. Another big thank you, just really quick, to our Romans 8 team. That's our technology crew. Nothing can separate us from the love of God that's helping to make this possible, and everyone that's been a part of making this event happen. Especially we celebrate Paulette Rogers, who's here with us today, Carol Emmons, who's at home helping to moderate our Zoom session, Harrison Nagasa, Alvar Hemez, and Josh Dunlop, who have been part of making this session possible. Just a couple quick notes on logistics. We are doing this session both in person and at home. And so we do have a little bit of a go-between, but please be patient with us with the technology of grace. We think we have it all worked out. And so one of those special features is when we do get to the question and answer time, for those at home, we will be allowing you to ask those questions out into the open. We have a TV screen set up here. And so your face and your voice will be projected into the sanctuary space here so that our panelists and our moderator can hear that when that time comes up. Also, you're welcome to type in any questions into the chat, and we'll try to gather those and bring those forward as well as the time allows us. The structure of our panel, I'm going to finish up here. Pastor Harry is going to open us up in prayer. Miss Paulette Rogers-Gumbas is going to introduce our moderator. And then we are off to the races with Mr. Art Sims as our Master of Ceremonies, taking it away. Also, just to note, we are going to continue to be masked and distant here. The panelists and the moderator will only take off their masks briefly to speak into the microphone for clarity of sound. Also, just one final note, we are requesting feedback at the end of this session. There's a form, a Google form online, so that you can help to shape our events moving forward, and also let us know how things went here today, and help us envision what it might look like for the church to be concerned about civil rights now and moving forward. And so with that, I would like to hand off the microphone to Pastor Harry to pray us into our time together.
Hello, everyone. Great to be with you. And I trust we will have a very warm and enjoyable conversation, rich fellowship together. Civil rights then and now. The civil rights movement, of course, was birthed in the church and received so much energy and power from the gospel. And of course, I'm standing here at this lectern where I stand most every Sunday, where Dr. King spoke more than 50 years ago. And so what I did is I'm going to open us in prayer. I'm going to add a few of my own words, and then I'm going to finish with a prayer that Dr. King used, asking that we might make a creative contribution to this world. And so, dear people of God, let us join our hearts and let us pray. Most gracious and wonderful God, we thank you for the heritage of faith, and we thank you for the heritage of the faith of this Christian community, which across some 160 years has sought to live out the gospel in this community, especially in the midst of the struggles of the civil rights movement of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, in which you led this congregation to embrace the community and led to a vitality in our spiritual life and our life together. And so, gracious God, I lift up also these words. Oh God, we thank you for the lives of great saints and prophets in the past who have revealed to us that we can stand up amid the problems and difficulties and trials of life and not give in. We thank you for our foreparents who've given us something in the midst of the darkness of exploitation and oppression to keep going. Grant that we will go on with the proper faith and the proper determination of will, so that we will be able to make a creative contribution to this world. In the name and the Spirit of Jesus we pray. And Lord, bless us now in this time of fellowship. May our faith be encouraged, may our discipleship be enriched, and may we more richly and wonderfully reflect your will and your love for all people in our walks of faith. Amen.
Testing. Good afternoon. It's great to be home. Ladies are not supposed to tell their age, but I am 51 years old, and praise God, I've been a member of this church for 51 years. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful that you've helped my family along. As I think about the Rogers, we lived in 1510 West 14th Place, what you know now as the Citgo. We know that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King got his hair cut at a barber shop called Tommy's. We know that today as Jewel Food. And I won't steal from anyone's thunder, but I look forward to this. I want to welcome legendary broadcaster Art Sims. He is a social media influencer, an actor, a voiceover, affectionately known as Chat Daddy. He's an established and very well-respected 20-year career and has entertained audiences via the radio, television, and print, and stage online. His undeniable charm and quick wit led to appearances on Windy City Live, ABC TV Chicago, You and Me This Morning, and the WCIU TV network in Chicago. In addition, he's a columnist with the famed role with the Chicago Defender. Mr. Sims is currently the creator, executive producer, and host of The Real Chat Daddy Show, which is a live, nightly digital media show that offers a current news, health awareness, and pop trend stories. In 2014, Sims joined WVON, what we know as 1690 AM, Voice of the Negro, as an air talent. He serves as the executive producer of Real Talk, Real People, and is a nightly broadcast that is heard globally via iHeartRadio. Mr. Sims attended Luther South High School. He was before my time, but it's always great to see him around the city of Chicago. I don't want to say he's like an old penny that keeps showing up, but when I'm walking around Chicago, walking out of the hair salon, I look up, there's Chat Daddy. If I'm having a bad hair day and I don't want to see anybody, there's Art pointing me out. So thank you for joining our family today, Mr. Sims. Great to have you here at my home.
It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all on this beautiful afternoon. Thank God this was this weekend versus 2 weekends ago when we couldn't do anything. I want to say hello to each and every one of you during this global pandemic, and thank God that you're all alive and we're here. We're doing something that we didn't even think we could do months ago. Happy Black History Month, and I am honored to lead you through this conversation today. Now, I did do a little research and found out that this beautiful building, I've been here many times before for weddings, events, and services, was built in 1856. A long time ago, and I don't want to get into that history, but I want to talk about the importance of civil rights, the change of the neighborhood, and how this church remains strong to this very day. And the first person who I'd like to talk to is a lady whose husband pastored this amazing church, Pastor Donald Becker. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to begin with Miss Carolyn Becker and let her share her story. Good morning, and it's an honor to talk with you.
I'm not sure what you want me to do. You want me to start by talking about 60 years of history. So I came to First Immanuel in the summer of 1959 when I was a student at Valparaiso University in Indiana, and I was assigned here since I was in the deaconess program. George Manning was 10 years old. I was 21. So the first thing I did was started to date the pastor and got married to him in November of 1960.
I like how you said started to date and married the pastor. Smart move. Very good. Very good.
So you want me to just go on?
Keep going. Yes. Tell us that history.
Well, a lot was happening in the 60s. The church had begun to become integrated racially when the previous pastor, Ralph Mullering, had come. And the church had made a decision that they would reach everybody, regardless of race, culture, and so on. And this was done before the Supreme Court in the United States said that there could be no discrimination in public schools. But First Immanuel had already said that they would not discriminate at this church. So that they began to invite people from the neighborhood. The Manning family was one of the early families. And so when my husband came in 1958, one of his goals was to reach a lot of the Black men that were in the neighborhood. And by visiting people, and of course, this was when we had the housing projects over there, had 7 tall buildings, 15 stories each. And he could make visits all night long, going from one floor to the next. And my job in 1959 was to handle the Sunday school. By that time, there were about 250 students in the Sunday school. By 1962 or 3, there were 450 students in the Sunday school. And we had, by that time, trained some of our own members, but we also had a lot of help from students from Concordia College, which is now University in River Forest. And they came every Sunday on the Lake Street L to help teach the Sunday school children and canvass the area. It was an altogether different time, of course, but that was kind of key in the integration of the church. The Sunday school kids brought their parents.
Ms. Becker, I did have a question. With the influx of the number of students who started to come to Sunday school, was it that people were getting more into religious movements and involvement, or was it just that the ministry and the outreach was so great that that's what made you have such a growth in Sunday school students?
Yeah, I think most of the people at this table here, with the exception of George Manning, Tyrone Wallace's mother was here already before my husband came in 1958. The Carters were another family. That's Betty's family there. But most of the other Black members at that time really came through the Sunday school. There's a great case of the Walton family, which was now a big family in the congregation. Their two sons came to Sunday school because somebody had visited them, and the parents didn't know. They thought they were going to, what was it, Shiloh? Or no, not Shiloh. Baptist Church. They found out one of the Concordia students visited them and said, "We're so glad to have your sons in our Sunday school." And I said, "Oh, no, they go to the Baptist church." "Well, no, they don't." And so then the father of the family wanted to find out what Lutherans were all about. Well, Larry happened to marry a Walton, and that's how they came through. So that by the time 1965, 1966 came around, the congregation was fairly well settled with the Black families coming in and integrating the church, and we still had white families still in the congregation. So when the West Side organization in the community, which was right here at Roosevelt and Ashland, had asked my husband whether Dr. King could hold a rally here, he said, that would be fine, but I'll have to check with my voting members. By that time, we had council members, and there were about 10 men at that time. Women were not voting at the time. And they took it to a vote, and it was 5-4 in favor. The 5 votes were all Black men, and the 4 votes were all white men. And at that time, we were financially helped by the Lutheran headquarters in the area, and they called, the white men from this congregation called them and said, they want to have Dr. King in our church. It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be burning, and violence will take place. And so one of the mission developers of the district called my husband and said, "Did you have a vote?" And he said, "Yes, we did." "What was the vote?" "It was 5-4. He said, "Well, go ahead." But some of the white guys, they really wanted to bolt the doors, and so there was a lot of fussing about that, more than fussing. If it was before the emails, if it had been emailed, there probably had been a whole bunch of emails coming out. But having Dr. King here was a turning point, I think, for the congregation. And that after that, the Black members really felt that they had an ownership in this congregation, and that this was their church also. And the white people that stayed, some of them were extremely helpful in the transition of the families. Some of the members left after that King thing, but a lot of them just stayed, and we had some very good relationships with the white members that stayed. And so that was then kind of the riots, but the riots were more, I think they were further west. I mean, they were not basically right here, even though we lived across the street at the time, and we had an Italian neighbor, and when the riots were going down further around Pulaski Road, the old Italian man said, "You know, they're rioting just like the old Italians used to do." Well, not quite.
Right.
But so then when the Black Power movement kind of came in after King was assassinated, like 69, 68 and 69 and 70, then we thought maybe we should leave as the white pastor and so on. But my husband was good friends with several of the Black clergy on the south side, and Pastor Bill Griffin was a key one. He said, well, he said, Don, he said, I'll tell you when it's time to leave. And he never did. So that was, but, all right.
No, your story is absolutely beautiful and touching, and to know that you did not give up, you and your husband, you just stay on, and your memory of everything is really crystal clear. I applaud you for that. Great job of sharing the story. Out of all your years of being here, before I move on to other panels, what would you say was the biggest, most profound impact on you personally watching all of this here at this?
Well, you know, when I came here, I was 21, and I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago. When I was at Valparaiso, there were 2 African-American students only. And so I had absolutely no experience with another culture. And, but when I came here, it was like, it was such a change for me, but I had such a great problem with my family and my relatives and my high school friends and so on, that just, you know, we were constantly arguing. I know when my husband and I would go to family events, we would leave and say, okay, now today we're not gonna get into any argument. But you had to get into an argument because, you know, all these stereotypes and prejudices that were coming out just got us into big trouble with our family and so on. And by this time, the Vietnam War protested, we were involved in that. And we were involved in marches for the open housing. And my husband was writing letters to, you know, First Federal about their redlining and explaining civil disobedience. And I just read an article that my husband wrote in 1968 to a Lutheran publication about white power. Today, it would probably be called white privilege, but it was just, you know, so all those things kind of got us in trouble. The headquarters of the Lutheran Church, when we started to integrate, shouldn't say integrate, but had women more involved. Betty's mother was the first deacon, female deacon. And I know she said, oh, I don't know if I should be a deacon because I think maybe the men will just drop out. Well, the men were just so supportive. And I think it helped. More men came in, more women came in, and because of having women having an equal thing.
Very good. Ms. Becker, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm sure we'll come back to you. Thank you for at least just setting up how this all started to flow, how it all continued to move along.
Yeah.
I noticed the gentleman sitting next to you, Mr. George Manning, who is actually the organist and musician here at the church. You stated 10 years old when he first came, but what are you, 21 now? So
I'm 27 backward.
Oh, okay. I just had to make sure, you know what I'm saying?
72.
Yes, sir. So I want to come to you now, if we could, to get your recollection of first being a part of this church and how your position here in the church has grown over the years. But let's keep in mind, we're still talking about the civil rights aspect of it as you continue to grow as well, too.
Well, I began with my mom and dad and my sister Mariana in the projects. In those days, it was called the Village. People think of it as ABLA, Jane Addams, Abbott, Loomis Court. And we lived 1314B, West Hastings. And we stayed there maybe 3 years, 4 years. I got through kindergarten at Joseph Medill. But the projects were really wonderful. And the worst thing you could do is bring the lawnmower back to the clubhouse late. You have to pay a quarter. And I always remember the joy of playing in the projects as children. And last night before, 24 robbers at my door. I got up, let them in, hit them in the head with a rolling pin. All hit, no free for Carolyn. She couldn't hide fast enough. And this is how we played. And when the lights went on in the street, then everybody went in. So the last games of hide and seek you did in your pajamas. And we lived there, but you had to submit your paycheck every 2 or 3 months so that the government knew you were earning the same amount. And as you got a quarter more or whatever, your rent went up a dime. And so most people were thinking, we're going to move someday. And my father had a very dear friend, and he was the rabbi of a church in Lawndale. It was at Lawndale and on Roosevelt Road. And so I don't know how many people know this, but when the Second World War ended, Jews saw black faces liberate them. So the relationship between black men and Jewish men was very positive. So the landlord of this building, he was the rabbi, wanted my parents to move in. So we moved into the second floor of his 2-flat. And immediately I became Jewish, and I would go to temple, shalom, with the rabbi, and he would.
Boy, they. That's all I can say.
Meshugana, yeah.
That's right.
And I would go to temple on Saturdays, and then we would go to a Baptist church on Sundays. And that went on for a while. And then one day, my parents received a phone call from Pastor Ralph Mollering asking if we would consider being in attendance and possible members at First Immanuel Lutheran Church. And my mother said, well, probably not. He said, well, your daughter goes to Ebenezer. She said, that's correct, and that was a Lutheran school. And he said, you'd be wonderful. We're trying to get more members. And we knew it was about integration. And my mother and father said, well, George is happy going to Temple Shalom. So that's what they said, we don't believe in busing. And so the pastor, Mollering, said, well, if we can find somewhere for you to live in this neighborhood, would you consider it? And so they said, okay, and they found the house next door to the church. That was the parsonage back when the church was built in 1888. And the new parsonage, which was built right about that same time, was across the street, a gorgeous gray stone, brownstone, marble column place. And that's where Carolyn and Pastor lived when they got married. But it was across the street. So we moved into the parsonage. And at the time, there were swastikas painted on the wall. They were trying to really get rid of the custodian at that time. It was deplorable. My father was very, very gifted in many, many things, as was my mother. And so they began to renovate that house. So we were one of the 3 or 4 first families here at First Immanuel. The Bays were one, the Ricks were involved, the Wallace family, the Carters. We were one of the first family. And my parents would wake me up every night as a 6-year-old child and put brown bags on my shoes and a rubber band around my ankle, and they put it on themselves as well. And we walk around and make crunching noise like you're walking on sugar. But those are the roaches we kill, because if you turn on the light, the roaches would scatter. So 3 times a night, starting about 8 o'clock, we turn the lights off, put on our brown bag shoes, and we walk around crunch, crunch, crunch. And we got rid of the swastikas. And right now, jumping far into where we are now, I learned a lot of stuff about restoration. And so when I bought my next two homes, they became US government landmarks and City of Chicago landmarks, because I knew how to renovate, not rip out. So that's what we did to get rid of the roaches, the mice, the rats. I think we killed like 15 rats a week. And so now the place is looking pretty good. And this is how I came to be next door. And it was wonderful because then my father became the custodian. But in his younger life, he was in the Negro Leagues, the Memphis Red Sox, And later on, he was one of the managers of Armour Meat Company and the stockyards. And so he was a person that dealt with the unions. And he was one of the architects to combine AFL, American Federation of Labor, to CIO, Congress of Industrial Organizations. And so that was his job. He knew a lot of people. He knew a lot of Teamsters. And so I grew up in a house where my mother was from Dixon, Illinois, and she used to help Ronnie with his homework, but Ronnie was a poor boy. And all the blacks in Dixon, which were very few, felt sorry for them because his father was the drunk. And his mother was wonderful, though. And so later, Ronnie, they felt sorry because he was a Democrat. And all black people were Republican. African American people were Republicans. Abraham Lincoln freed us, Jesus saved us, and the Republicans were the abolitionists. So Ronnie was a Democrat, but later he became Ronald Reagan, your president. And my folks would always say, that's pitiful, but that's walking us forward into First Immanuel. So when we got here, I was the youngest, and I think one of the few children, and Carolyn talks about 400 kids in Sunday school. Well, they didn't have Sunday school because everyone was old. And I want to share with you the integration process, which was very interesting. Black people began to come. The Germans were here. And one of the most beautiful women, white women, she came to my mother, and I remember them talking in the kitchen. And she says, I'm glad you're here, and I'm going to make sure you're happy. This woman looked like Elizabeth Taylor with white hair. And her husband looked like, I don't know, a movie star with white hair. Maybe he looked like a Clark Gable type. They were the Zilkeys, you remember them? And they would wear powder blue clothes with their white hair. And Alice Zilke said to my mother, when I came to First Immanuel and married my husband, they didn't speak to me for years because I'm Bohemian and the church is German. Racism has nothing to do, and I'm speaking now, racism has nothing to do with pigment, or if it does, very little. If it had to do with pigment, Rwanda, racial cleansing, all of those people look dark. It has to do with power.
That's right.
If it had to do with pigment, Sarajevo, racial cleansing, ethnic cleansing, all those people look white. It had to do with power. So when you think of someone like Mrs. Zilke saying, I'm Bohemian, and the German people don't like me, but they got to love all of us. Then we had a vicar, his name was Tay, he was from Korea. So we would dress up once a year like Vicar Tay. We had a vicar Horde, who was black, and the German people didn't like when the German-speaking ministers spoke because Vicar could speak idiomatically in German and crack jokes. And then we had other Spanish-speaking ministers like Pastor Schmidt, and they brought to the church hundreds of Hispanic members. So the church was divided up into groups that worked together. So if it was October, the German people put on Oktoberfest and we had beer. Everyone, if you had lederhosen, you could wear them. But that's what we did. When it got to be Christmas time, the Hispanic women stayed in the parish hall kitchen and they made tamales, and we had piñatas, and we all became Hispanic. If it was around Thanksgiving, black people came on with chitlins, turkey, ham, whatever, and everybody was black. And when it was around July, Vicar Tay from Korea, we wore kimonos, and everybody was Asian. So it was a wonderful church to see. Pastor Becker came there shortly after, and he could walk through the projects, and everybody yell out the window, PB's in the corner, PB's coming. And they had a lot of respect for Pastor Becker and for Carolyn. And so they were sort of like our king and queen of the church. And that is my remembering how I got here as a kid. I was very petted, sort of spoiled, I guess. But then, why not? If not me, who else? It was a good time.
Your story is actually just beautiful, touching. I'm surprised you did not go into the extermination business because you truly taught me something that I didn't know you could do. But but just to know that the rich history of the cultural togetherness that was a part of this really speaks volume about why you're still here and are still very active in the church. Very good. In closing, not that we wouldn't come back to you, but fondest memory, as I said to Ms. Becker, of just a moment that you knew you were in the right place in your mind. What was that particular moment here in church?
Back in 1966, I graduated from Crane High School, and I was awarded a job from YMCA International and the Peace Corps to go to Venezuela to teach art and music, because I was classically trained as a pianist and a violinist and a violist. And I had gone to the Art Institute of Chicago from the age of 5 until I graduated from high school. And so I went with a group of people and taught music and art at the camps in Venezuela, Bogota, Colombia, and Santiago, Chile. And while I was there, my mother wrote a letter. She wrote a letter every day, but she had a beautiful handwriting, and I have to read the way she wrote it, but she said, George, you have been in Venezuela for 2 weeks, and we have yet to receive a letter from you. Daddy and I would like to think that you wrote one, but somehow it was lost in the mail. That's a beautiful way to write. Not, boy, where's the letter? That's kind of thing. But later on, I got a letter from her, and she said, Dear George Honeycake, July 8, 1966. This is early Friday morning, 6:30. I have bathed, and Anna is still asleep. Carol and the babies also. Today I'm going to the doctor and then to work. And Anna came in to hear Reverend King at First Immanuel. She will leave today. I received a thrill. Martin, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, had not eaten since early day, and I was able to fix sandwiches for him and his young assistant ministers. Tomorrow is Mary's birthday. Very matter of fact. And so King was next door at our house where we used to have to put bags on our feet and walk around and crunch roaches and get rid of the swastikas. And he was there because it was a safe haven and my mother could really cook. And that is a memory on paper that I'll never forget. And I knew if King could speak here, I could stay here.
Amen.
It's a beautiful story. Big round of applause for that beautiful story, as well as Ms. Becker's story was just incredible, just heart-touching in many ways. And just to give you some comfort that if in modern times your mom asks, how come you haven't written in 2 weeks, blame it on the post office now. That's all you have to do. Just say, Mom, it's the post office. But a beautiful story. And thank you so much for sharing that. I want to now move over to my good friend, Miss Betty Stanfield. She and I just met in the hallway, and we are besties now. And she escorted me in today. And I understand, Betty, you have just a wonderful history to share as well, too, about this beautiful church. So as we say, the floor is yours, my friend.
I could say a lot of my history has been encapsulated by George and Mrs. Becker because I lived a lot of that history with them. But we lived, and I was thinking one day when I was on my way here to church, we lived at 2425 West Washburn before coming in this direction. And we lived in a house that was owned, as I learned later on in life, by a slumlord. My grandparents lived upstairs, It was a house that he had broken up, and my parents and my siblings and I, we lived on the first floor. So our room, our sleeping area, and our living area was the kitchen, the dining room, and the living room. The living room was our bedroom, and my parents would put together chairs so that we could sleep on the sofa and on the chairs because we did not have a bedroom. And I thought about that as we were going through all this. So as a result, and because my father and mother would be up at night fighting rats to keep them from getting to us so that we could sleep comfortably, and as a result of that, they started looking for a place for us to live, a decent place. And one day my mother came home, and it was shortly after Christmas in 1954, and she said, "We have found a place to live." And it was the housing projects across the street. And we moved between Christmas and New Year's into our new place. It was in a row house, 4 bedrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, and a little, what they would call a storage area where we could put our wash machine and hang up our clothes and whatever. But it was the best place for us to live. We didn't have to worry about rats, my parents being up night fighting for them, and worrying about them getting to the baby because I had 2 younger siblings who were born at that house. And that way they had protection for us. We came to First Immanuel because of Pastor Mallory. He came to the area, and as a result, my mother came here. She brought us, and then she came too. And as a result of 1955, we've been in this church for all those years. And I was 7 years old when we started coming here. Baptized at 8 years old. And ever since then, my life has been part of this, and it has been a foundation for my whole life. First Emmanuel taught us how to live. We learned how to live with different people. And at the time that I came, and Carolyn will remember, we had what we call a Native American family. I forgot their name, but we had the Hunters. Yeah, we had one Native American family, Hispanic, German, and African American. We had services in Spanish. On each Sunday, we would have English and then Spanish. So therefore, my whole life has been involved with a variety of people. I did not know what it's like to be one specific group of people. We were always exposed to different people. And that taught me how to live among other people. So we were involved in the Sunday school. I was involved in the choir, taught Sunday school classes, helped with the confirmation classes, and worked with the youth group. So from there on, as a result of being in the youth group, we had youth leaders who showed me how to present myself and exposed me to a different world. I went to Valparaiso University, and at Valparaiso, I may have encountered prejudice here within the city, but when I went to Valparaiso, that's when I saw it up front. And I remember walking one day. We had an old campus and a new campus. I lived in the new campus, and I had to walk to classes to the old campus. And I was walking to class, and I heard these young men saying, Caucasian, saying, "Oh, I didn't know they let them on." And I thought about, what did he mean by that? Let them on campus. Then once I thought about it, there were not that many African American students on campus. You could count them on your hand, 2 hands. That's how many were on campus. So then that was my first encounter with outright prejudice. And then I had an advisor where I was having some difficulty with my studies. And he told me because I did not score very high on the SAT, that I should never have been at that school. But at that time, they did not really prepare us for the SAT and the ACT exams. We did not know about that you could go to these different classes and get all this extra help. That was another encounter. And by me being the only student, Black student in our particular dorm, and we would go to different places and get churches that were Caucasian, and I would be the only Black person within these congregations. And I learned how, I would be treated one way when I was there, but then when I got away, then that's when I found out that I was completely different from life. So, first Immanuel, when I came back here, I was after school. I only completed 1 year because I said I was going to stay off 1 year work to earn enough money so I could focus on my studies. But as it turns out, my dad became ill and he died, and I made the decision to just stay, not go back to school, to take that financial burden off my mother so my other siblings could have the advantage that I didn't get. And as a result, when I came back to First Immanuel, I was glad because I was home, because I was in a place that would embrace me and I was safe. And from there, I've been involved in all types of activities here because of that. And from that, my short story.
Your family has a rich history as well, too. Other family members, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, they have rich history. My father and Mr. Manning were very good friends. They were like father and son. My father started working at Armor, and as a result, Mr. Manning saw my father and he took him underneath his wings. And we've been friends ever since I was a child. And they looked after us after my father passed because he died at a very young age. And Mr. Manning and Mrs. Manning were like our surrogate grandparents for us. Then we've George and I are like brother and sister, and his sister is my sister. Her daughter is my niece. So we go back.
I do have a question. With this church being where it's located now, the rich medical history, looking at the fact that the area is changing quite a bit from you all grew up here in this area to now this being the hot, sizzling place to reside and live, do you think it has been the church that has stood fast during this time? Or do you think, maybe eventually that'll change, but this church has stood the test of time? What do you think the formula or secret of that is?
I think it's because we've stood firm and steadfast in what this church represents. We're still growing. Never going to say that because we've reached our point. We haven't. We still have to grow. Still have to be open to the changes that are coming in the neighborhood, to what is happening in the world, so that we can continue and and not repeat some of the things that we ourselves have experienced and pass it on to other generations. Show the other generations that you have to learn from the past, even though you're in the present, to preserve the future.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we continue to move on to our next panelist? Any particular fond memories that you may have, that one particular memory that stood out of any other of your association with this church?
The day my father became a member, that was it. Because my mother had been trying to get him to become a member of the church, and he did not want to, and it was Mr. Harris, who was my father's buddy, who convinced him to become a member of that church. And when my father died, Mr. Harris became our surrogate father. And so I guess you could say because of that, this has been our family, and it has been supportive of us. And as a result of what I gained from those members, I try to do with the younger members of our church. And sometimes they'll see me come and they want to run, but then I would tell them, no, come, because you need to know. And because of that, I'm here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was just really a touching story. Thank you again. As we continue to move on, last but not least, we're going to interview Mr. Tyrone Wallace. Mr. Wallace, good afternoon. Thank you so very much for being so patient and listening to all these other stories. And, I'm sure you have quite a bit to share. Let's start off when your history first started here at this church, and then let's move forward.
I'm a member of this church for 60 years.
How could that be? You only look 24. 60 years. You need a new calculator, brother. You look good.
Thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, look, good black don't crack. That's what we say, yes.
66 in June.
Look at God. That's beautiful.
God is good.
That's right.
My mother, she was here. She was here. Also here with Betty and them when Pastor Moeller was here as a pastor. She used to always bring us to church, and we was delighted to come. And she would always say, I don't care what you do on the weekend, you're going to get up on Sunday and go to church. That's what we did. It was so much happening at First Immanuel when I was coming up. It was so much to do. We had a youth worker here by the name of George Smith. He would come into the neighborhood and he would take us places. We would go down to the YMCA. He would take us driving in his car. PB was able to walk. PB can go anywhere in this neighborhood he wanted to go. You thought he lived here. He can go into projects on the 14th floor, the 15th floor. That's how much he was known. And when we was coming up in the projects, I stayed in 1510, it was 13th Street. Believe it or not, we had doctors that lived in the same building because they worked at the university and they lived over in the projects. Okay. They lived in the projects. And I remember Concordia, students from Concordia coming by and taking us to Concordia and taking us out to visit the college and all that. And we had a program here at First Immanuel where whites would come in and take some of the blacks for the summertime out to their house. And I stayed with the Martys, Martin E. Marty, for 2 weeks. Come up with all his sons. It was a white family. They stayed in Riverside. And from there, we stayed in contact with each other, even after the 2 weeks was over with. I didn't see back then as much racism as I see today, but I know that it always existed. I just didn't see it then because there was so much to do. Back then, Christian whites were Christian whites, and then once Christians was a Christian, but when you begin to put the white in front of the Christian, it became a problem. God made everybody equal. So I didn't see as much racism back then as I do today, but it existed. And I always say if Christians would be Christians and not look at the color of their skin, it would be a better world today. You know, I mean, now it's obvious. I mean, wherever you go, you see it. You know, wherever you go, you see it. I mean, it's just rapid. You know, this church has played a big part of my life. I I worked as a usher. Remember Mr. Harris? He had passed, and he was the head usher of the church. And before he passed, he assigned me that position, and I've been in that position ever since. I've been holding that position ever since then. The church has grown, you know, and I remember how it used to be Polish, and went from Polish, you see blacks. From blacks, you see now whites and Hispanic. I mean, we're just coming together as a church. You know, coming up in the area, we had the Broadway Strand. We had the Tampico Theater. You know, it was so much to do. You know, we had another youth worker, his name was TJ. We had a group here, was called Black Youth Unlimited. I think Miss Beck and George, they remember that. We visited Christ the King over on 38th and Lake Park. And at this one particular year, the Black Youth Unlimited was holding a convention in Atlanta, Georgia. And the church sent 5 of us down there with this with the convention. And our mothers paid half and the church paid half of it. It was, you know, me, George Oliver, Bobby Walton, Richard Jackson, Glenn. We all went to the convention, you know, and it was a lot to do. It was a lot to do.
And as you said before, now more than ever, we're seeing so much, you know, racial tension and civil unrest and things like that. What do you think has been in your opinion, the cornerstone of keeping this church relevant? Much like the question I asked the other panelists. And where do you think the future of this church will be as it pertains to keeping people unified in the name of the Lord?
Well, as long as we can stay together as one, keep Christ first, that's the key. That's the key to this church growing. You know, this church has been through a lot. You know, been through a lot, but we're still here. And we're here for a reason. We're here to serve not this race, but all races. You know, and that's what's going to motivate us to keep moving forward.
Beautiful. In closing, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, this one of my fondest memories of this church was back in 1996. That was the day when I got married in this church. You know, and Pastor Becker, and we had just got another pastor, Pastor Carey. He was the first. He did our first marriage. He performed the first service church of being married, along with Pastor Becker. And to this day, me and my wife are still together. Be 25 years in August. But that was one of the funnest memories that I had in this church, and just all of us coming together as one.
Beautiful. Very good. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
that beautiful story. All of you all have just shared what I consider very powerful, very important stories and stories that need to be heard. Now more than ever, these type of stories need to come to the forefront. And I am just honored to be here today, not only to hear these stories, but for the masses who are watching us via Zoom, as well as this being archived. These type of stories need to be told. Our young people are clueless of their history. If it has not happened in the last 10 years, they would have no idea what you're talking about. So really, you're really rich historians, rich congregant members, and it really is something that I would love to see you all continue to get this story shared and archived as much as possible. Is there anything else that maybe I should find out from our panelists that I did not get out of them?
I'm just going to speak into the mic so our folks at home can hear us. I would love to maybe dig into a little bit more also. I know there's some stories around maybe housing equality, the activism that might have been going on between 50s, 60s, and moving forward. And I know Paulette may also want to throw something in there as well. Is that right, Paulette?
That's very true. We have such a rich history in this congregation. And personally, I want to thank Mrs. Becker, George Manning, Betty Stanfield, and Tyrone Wallace. I can say that I would not know how to ballroom dance if it weren't for George Manning. Now, I'm not ready for Dancing with the Stars, but to know how to tango, to know how to rumba, to have etiquette as I move into a ballroom dinner, know where my snitch fork is. I wouldn't be able to do any of that if it weren't for George Manning. To have the academic support of the Lutheran Church at Missouri Synod, 5 Rogers children would not have graduated Luther South and Luther North. All 5 children would not have gone to college. My dad made it clear, you had to go to college. He was a trucker, but you had to go to college. So this congregation gave us that opportunity. And I was able to move on to Northwestern University. I didn't graduate biology pre-med, but I still graduated with a 3.0 GPA. And when the going got tough in organic chemistry, and I got the first C that I got in my whole life, and I was ready to jump into Lake Michigan, there was one thing that held me strong, and it was my faith. It was my faith that I learned here at First Immanuel. First Immanuel taught me to pray when the going got tough, when Northwestern showed me that I was in a very big pond. I was a very small fish in a big pond with my first C in my whole life. This congregation uplifted me. When I'm cleaning up at home, my Neville's grandmother, my voice rings true in my heart. And now today I understand why Myrtle made us sing, lift every voice and sing, as we cleaned up the house on Saturday morning. I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now, that George Manning coming to your house to teach your older sisters to play the piano, we thought that they were making a lot of noise. We didn't understand it, but he gave us that opportunity. When my sister was in the Miss Chicago pageant, who helped her pick out the dress but George Downing? And as we look at these cotillion pictures over the years, who taught us to ballroom dance? We filled the Chicago Hilton Towers several times. And I just think that's worthy of applause. I'd like to see it continue. If we're at Wall Camp, if we're at Miller Meadow Forest Preserve for a picnic, I'd like to see it continue. This is my family, and this is my home. And quite frankly, I drive past a lot of churches as I cross the 40 miles. But there's one thing that keeps me coming back, and that's because the love I have for my family. I feel comfortable here. I'm so grateful.
Very good. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. As we continue on with this conversation, as the future of our city and the things that we've been through here in our city, what would you all like to say to the public, to people with this pandemic? It seems as if we're getting a curve on COVID-19. Worshiping is very important for people. A lot of places of worship, members have not been able to come out and participate and be a part of. I commend you all for doing this today, just to celebrate Black History Month and to preserve the history of this church. What words would you want to say to people as the world opens back up, as it pertains to coming back here to the church?
I was speaking to several people over this last 2 months, and I said to each of them, I'm a terrible Christian. Now I said, oh, you got to be kidding. Why are you saying? I said, I'm terrible. I didn't realize I was terrible, but during this pandemic, I figured it out. I baptize myself at the end of my bath every day. The last thing I do is, and people laugh, so it's a baptism. And I ask for stuff. I said, take care of Carolyn, take care of Larry, take care of my sister, give me safe passage. Hopefully they don't catch COVID. I ask her for a lot of stuff. But I never say thank you. It's like the 10 lepers, you got here. And I've been just asking and asking and asking for stuff. I finally figured it out in 72 years. The thing that this has taught us is to be thankful. You might never have thought it was a great thing when your mother or father died and you had a funeral in this church with food that you couldn't finish eating, so you had to take it home in containers. Church can feed 500 people and give leftovers, hugging and kissing. The pandemic has taught us it was a good thing my mother died years ago. It was a good thing that so-and-so died last December because we got together. So what we have to do is be hopeful, thankful, so that we can relive a new history in a church where its members come from Woodridge, Illinois, Evanston. Some have come in from Milwaukee. No one lives around the church, but they come from 83rd Street. They come from Oak Park. Just because the university has taken over, the fellowship still brings us back. So I'm thankful.
Beautiful. Anyone else want to add anything about us trying to come back to some sense? We know it will never be the normal. We know, and you're absolutely right about what you said. I lost a friend this morning to COVID-19, and just, this is just something none of us knew. But in order to give those that are watching and listening some peace and comfort that this is the house of the Lord, and you come here for whatever your problems are, what would you want to say to everyone to get back to normalcy?
George voiced some of the very same thoughts I was thinking. when my mother passed, we were sad to see her go. But as a result of this pandemic, I'm glad she's not here because we took care of her. We were able to hold her, talk to her, hug her. And then I think about some of the members who have gone, like Mrs. Walton, Mrs. Wallace. These are women from my childhood. Mr. Harris. They would be here to greet us and say, "Hey, baby, how you doing?" Or Mr. Harris, "I got to get my sugar from you before you leave." Or Mr. Brooks, the same thing. "Got to get my sugar." Or Miss Wallace, how you doing, Betty? You doing okay? They were here, and we could walk up to them and talk to them. So the young people and all the generations behind us that are coming, we need to be more appreciative of the time that we have. If that's one thing the pandemic has taught us, that we need to be grateful for the time that we have and look forward to the time when we can all get together again. And sometimes people say, well, the church hasn't been there for me, but in a way, the church has been there for you. Look at all the people who have come out to make sure that folks who have been ill have food. Look at the people who have come out and said, well, is there anything you want me to do? I'm going to come and get you if they're in their bubble. So they need to remember that. Don't forget the past so that we can go on into the future. Because we can't let some of the things, one thing this pandemic has shown us how ugly people can be. And we need to remember not to repeat that. Because if we continue to be horrible, that's going to affect us in the future.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. Great point.
In closing, I would just like to say that this pandemic has strengthened my faith a whole lot. So, in spite of it all, we still know that God's in control. Doesn't nothing happen in this world by mistake. I would like to say to those, if I lent you $1 and you say, well, I give it back to you, and I would tell you, no, don't give it back to me. Just do the same, just return the favor to someone else. That's all I'm looking for. Just return the favor. How much better this world would be if we just did that.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Ms. Becker. Oh, yes, sir. I'll come back to you, and then I'm going to get Ms. Becker last.
Okay.
They who start first is last, but go right ahead. We'll get this gentleman, and then we'll go to Ms. Becker.
And since this is the last day in Black History Month, it's a wonderful month because it has Groundhog's Day, Black History Month, my birthday, President's Day, Valentine's Day, Groundhog, it's wonderful. But I like to bookend two real quick stories. One of them is my mother and father got together and decided they didn't want me to be a wuss, or they didn't want me to be a mama's boy. So the next time my father went on a trip, I was supposed to go with him. So I got ready to go on my father's next trip. And we got on a train, and it took at least 2.5 days to get where we were going. I was the pillow boy on the train. And when we got off the train, I said to my father, is it time to go home yet? He said, kissed me, said, baby, we just got here. And so we walked across a big field, and there were people making speeches, and this man got up, he said, I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. I said, Dad, he's redundant. He said, I have a dream at least 10 times. I think you should listen to the speech. It might be a wonderful speech one day. And here I found myself in Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington with my dad, which was also kind of interesting because historically you think it had to do with civil rights. Remember, my father was with AFL-CIO. It was a march for workers and jobs. And Martin Luther King was just one of maybe 14 speakers. And I remember that so strongly. And then later, coming forward, Pastor Harry, he took his little self to Washington. I took my little self to Washington. And we were there, and Obama's talking. I didn't get to see Martin Luther King be in the same arena with your pastor, listening to Obama. So our church went to quite a few things, and we'll continue to make history.
That's the rich ending to all of this, how it will continue to flourish, it will continue to grow, and that's beautiful. Very well. Well, Miss Becker, it's back to you and I tangling again. Yes, it's back to us. Yes.
What is so refreshing about First Immanuel is that lots of times when pastors retire and they come back after a while, which we did, and somebody said, well, you probably saw everybody's the same. I said, no, I came in and at least half of the people I didn't know. And I said, that's great. That's what it should be. I shouldn't come back and everything's the same as it was 20 years ago. But First Immanuel keeps reinventing itself all the time, and it's doing it again. When we came, the white people lived way out, and the black people lived in, and the Mexicans lived. Now, black people live way out, some of them, and the neighborhood is different. And First Immanuel always had the history of ministering to the neighborhood. Not that you're forgetting the people out there, but that you minister who is around you, and that's what's happening at First Immanuel. And that is great, that I come here and there's a lot of people I don't know, and that's a sign of progress and going on. And I think if First Immanuel would be involved in a lot of the things that we were involved with, open housing, they would be involved with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all those important questions, voting rights, John Lewis, history, so on.
Thank you all so very much. Each one of you, I feel, added just some of the best dialogue, really great, rich history. The conversation was really civil rights then and now. And I think in order to convey such a beautiful story that you all told is your personal journeys. Personal journeys really trumps anything else. I mean that Trump, but trumps anything else that one would say about the life and time of a organization, a church building, whatever the case may be. So I applaud each and every one of you for just being so great at sharing your stories. Big round of applause for these amazing people. I am honored to just be able to be the recipient of hearing these stories firsthand. And I do know, just as I said before, the rich history of this church. I turn it over to you, my friend. I know we want to do a Q&A, and I can conduct that as well, but I'm sure there are some things you want to say.
Absolutely. I just wanted to open it up to the Q&A session. While I have the mic right now, I don't know if I'll get it back for the Q&A session, but I've shed a couple tears over here just listening to your stories. They've been beautiful, faithful witnesses in your journey. So I just want to thank you all for sharing what you have so far. And so I do want to open it up to questions and answers, both for people here and those at home. So if there are any questions either in the chat, or if you want to try to raise your hand, there's a raise your hand feature on Zoom, and you can also just kind of put your hand in the front of the screen and wave it, and we'll try to get over to there as well. So I would love to open it up to questions and answers, and Art, we can help pair up to make sure we get those questions. So any questions popping up in the chat or at home or here in our audience? or anyone here in the physical space have any question or response as well, or something that touched a story of yours at home potentially? Anyone have something they want to share or ask? Okay. What'd you say, Rebecca? Larice on Zoom. So we can go to speaker view and then we'll unmute Larice and then we can turn this screen here so that everyone here gathered can see Larice ask a question.
There you go.
Okay, I'm asking a question now. And my question is,
Dorothy.
Go to
George, how
speaker
long have
view
you
for
been
us,
organized
if
at
you're
the
John.
church?
Okay.
Hold on one second, Larice.
Okay.
Can you go to speaker for us, John? All right, Larice, we should be able to hear you in the church.
Okay, George, I was going to say, I enjoyed all of you, but I wanted to know how long George has been the organist for First Immanuel.
Did you hear that, George? How long have you been the organist here at First Immanuel?
50th year this year.
Congratulations.
So after undergraduate, back in 1970, I came back home. A lot of people, Carolyn thought I was going to go to Europe or somewhere. You didn't think I was going to come back here. And I came back, and I've been organist here for 50 years.
I remember that Pastor Becker would say, when people asked how long have they had the organist, they said, how can they get one? They said, you have to grow yours up like we did.
Did our panelists hear that?
What'd she say?
Larice,
said what-
can you say that once again for us here?
Pastor Becker, we used to say, another minister asked him, how can you get an organist like George? And he said, you have to grow yours up like we did.
Oh,
Harrison, do you have a question?
I should also say we have a wonderful choir, and I myself have played for 3 U.S. presidents and the Queen of England. But our choirs also sung for presidents. We did the Jimmy Carter Habitat for Humanity. We were choir of choice when he was doing Habitat. So.
Josh Dunlop here in the congregation has a question.
How long does it take for change to take place? Is it a matter of months, years, decades? Because in the United States, we've seen like it take a long time. But is there a way to speed it up that you've seen? Perhaps other countries have done it better. And do you have any suggestions on how to get to where we want to be a little bit faster than we are?
Change is happening constantly. We don't live in a static world. If you want to really be impressed with God and what God can do, if we cooperate, we had a huge snowfall a couple of weeks ago, basically. I'm not going to talk about the snowfall. I'm just going to say that every snowflake was different. Who does that? Every snow, and the snow was piled up to my chest. Likewise, the 7 billion people that inhabit the world, all different. But you put them all together, they look like people. And at some point, for change to happen, when I look across a room or a crowded bus or on a crowded street, I have to look at those people as being very similar to me. Not so different. But their uniqueness is unbelievable. And we can change if we stop trying to make other people us. Or if the other stops trying to make me them. Because you can get a real wonderful collection of human endeavor if you allow people to be the same, equal but different. That's how change happens.
Anybody else at this particular point?
There's a hand up.
We got a few more. Who is on, Josh? Okay, we're calling on David Grasmick at home, if we can move to speaker view.
Yeah, sure. I really more of a comment than a question, but what's totally amazing, impressed me since I've belonged to this church, is especially for the older members of the congregation, their Sunday school education was fantastic and their confirmation was fantastic. Because their expression is totally amazing. And it's so deep and it's so strong, and their understanding of the gospel message is so strong, and it just shows through on all the comments and the testimony that we get. And that strikes me as something truly wonderful with First Immanuel's history. And that was my comment. Great job, the ministers who've walked before and the work they did.
Thank you so much for that comment, David. I really appreciate that. I see Christian Ukachukwu with a comment.
Yes, you must have had practice with my last name. You nailed it perfectly.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you. I just want to say, in case anyone is wondering, I knew of First Immanuel before I came to Chicago from Nigeria in 1980. My uncle, who was going to Rush, had a wedding at First Immanuel in 1979. And when the wedding album came to Nigeria, I would spend hours looking at the people, looking at the sanctuary, looking at everything. One of the pages had a music sheet over the picture, and it was captioned something like, whatever the name of it was, played by the great George Manning. So I'm thinking that George Manning was a household name in the whole of USA. But that's not, this is what I knew of the church. My first day I walked in, my first week in Chicago was January. I was 20 years old, it was cold. I was having problems with the language. I was having problems with something as little as change, coins. The size of coins and their values was completely reversed what it was in Nigeria. So to make change for $1 confused me. Everything was frustrating. I thought people would think I'm slow, but I walked into this church. My uncle didn't even go with me because he was in medical school. He was always gone. So he said, if you want to go, just walk down this. I was on Marshfield. Walk down this street to Wood, go this way, go that way. The church is right there. I found the church, walked in. I thought everybody would know I'm different. But from the moment I walked in, I was just taken in, loved, cared for. I met Gerald Downing that day, and I felt like I had a big brother. I met Mrs. Wallace. These are the people I remember that stood out. I met Mrs. Carter. I met, I saw Mr. Harris. I didn't know his name. Everybody was greeting me with smiles, and I felt that this was one place I would walk in, even if I was having a hard week at school or whatever, and it was like being in a family. I was quiet, I wasn't trying to, but people will come and introduce themselves to me. On my first day, Gerald told me, if you need anything, anything at all, come to me. A few minutes after he said that, I ran to him and said, oh, I took some refreshment and they were asking if I have some change. I'm thinking this man must be regretting telling me this. But oh, no problem. He gave me money. I put in the cup, and I just felt that I was home. Of course, I met George. I met Mrs. Wharton. Again, like I said, Mr. Harris. I'm trying to think of Janet's father's name. Big. He was a deacon. He just came. He's a big guy. He put his arm around me, greeted me, cracked a few jokes. Half of what people were saying I didn't understand because I'm having problem with the accent. But every Sunday he saw me, he would brighten up. He would talk to me. He would kind of throw mock punches. I love that. So I knew I wasn't going anywhere else. I just wanted to mention this morning, George brought in an album and showed me my uncle. And it's not the wedding picture, but he showed me a picture of my uncle and my aunt. And that just took me back. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story and your experience, Christian. Another beautiful testimony. Other questions, comments, more things to share?
Kyle, Nancy Bunger has something she'd like to share or a question. Nancy, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my great-great-grandfather, Theodore Binger, was the original cantor at First Immanuel, Chicago. And I come from a long line of Lutheran pastors that eventually left the church. And I grew up not knowing anything about First Immanuel, even though I lived in the Chicago suburbs. I first discovered it when I was working at the Chicago History Museum, and we were doing an outreach project with the west side of Chicago, and I started attending some of the churches in the area to learn more about the history. And I was really fascinated to find out my own family had roots on the west side, and I spent some time speaking with Carolyn Becker and a lot of time speaking with George and other members of the congregation to learn more about this really incredible history of desegregation, which was so meaningful to me that I actually ended up becoming a historian. I was a conservator originally, so it had an impact on me. But when I listened to the other comment earlier about the Sunday school outreach, that struck a chord with me because my great-great-grandfather had been a Sunday school teacher and a cantor like George, and had been involved in outreach to the community through education, through music. And then I came to the church again because of this cultural outreach program through the Chicago History Museum. So I would just encourage the church to continue your outreach. You have something very unique, and the history of this church is very special, and you should continue to share it with programs like this. They're really wonderful. That's it.
That you sent us with pictures of your family still hanging here in the church.
Yes.
Is that Nancy Berger? Yeah, Nancy, your letter is hanging still by the picture of your relative who was cantor.
Good.
So when people come in, it's still hanging, your letter's hanging right there with it. Yeah.
I've always felt that I'm channeling my great-great-grandfather when I speak with you, George. I think you are kindred spirits.
For those of you who want to see the picture, if you go out the center door and look down the hall to your right. There's a letter hanging by a picture. I haven't seen it. She's with the Chicago History Museum.
Kyle, I'd like to make a comment.
I'm not, oh, sorry, Carol, we got to unmute you.
Okay. So I've only been a member of First time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I've only been a member a short time. And my background is very similar to Carolyn's. I also grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, but my grandparents lived at 18th and Ashland. And every week we would from the northwest side, get off the Eisenhower at Ashland and drive right past First Immanuel Church. I did that probably once or twice a week the whole time I was growing up. Had no idea I would ever end up a member here. And my experience also is very similar to Christians in that the day we walked in, my husband and I, we were swarmed with people asking us, you know, oh, what brought us here, and welcome, and we're so glad that you came. And I was just overwhelmed by the welcoming and the warmth. I grew up a Roman Catholic, and I'd never been in a Catholic church where people were so welcoming to each other. And so I knew that this was going to be my last stop, and that I would probably never go anywhere else to worship besides First Immanuel. And I just want to thank all of you for welcoming us and making us feel so at home.
Truly, truly amazing stories of welcome, stories of love and community, and even an encouragement for outreach. I'm going to take a little bit of liberty and ask one more question as we wrap up, actually directed to Carolyn. Other people can respond too, but you started to say a response to the church, was active in some stuff, a lot of wonderful history in the past. And today, you said, and we probably look like, if we put that activity forward into the day, it would look like being involved in the protests around George Floyd and the other murders of African Americans that have been happening for years and years and years and years and years and years, that have been so publicly displayed this year. Carolyn, if you could put a vision for what activism or what work for justice would look like for First Immanuel today, do you have any thoughts about what that could or should look like, or what you could envision for the church today as we do continue to unfold and expand and change and grow?
It's a question, what kinds of things they should be.
What sorts of activity could you see First Immanuel getting involved in today, bringing our history forward to the present?
Well, there's so many justice issues compared. I mean, these issues have been around for 500 years. So with the makeup you have here now in the congregation, it makes it a little different, but not really. I mean, prison reform and open, housing issues, voting rights. I'm not sure what else they would.
George Manning mentioned homelessness. And thank you. That is a helpful response, and that is really the segue that I'm hoping that's a conversation that as we continue this conversation around civil rights then and now in our sessions moving forward, we explore what sort of work is being done in some of those areas, and just continue to envision together as a congregation and community, if we feel a call, if our changing and growing and shifting has something to touch in those areas. And so I just thank you for the comment. I just want to, as we wrap up, people have been on Zoom for a very long time today, and we said we were going to probably wrap up closer to 3 originally. So I just want to profoundly thank each and every one of you, our panelists here today, for all of the testimony and witness that you have shared with us. A big, huge thank you to Art Sims as we round out our time together. Actually, Art, I wanted to make sure, do you have any words that you would like to share with us as we close either?
I just want to say thank you guys so very much for including me in this today. During this pandemic, a lot of my work has been online, from doing a nightly show to even being master of ceremonies, funerals and memorial services. And when my dear friend here asked me to come and be here in person today, I'm just so honored. I'm happy to be here. Everything was done in order, done in accordance to the rules, and I appreciate you all so much. And it's an honor to be here. And the only thing I'm upset and mad about is that you said you fed 500 people and there was a take-home plate. Well, today I guess I'll have to do a drive-through when I leave here. Other than that, there's no greater food than a Sunday church plate. And so God bless you all, and thank you so much for this opportunity of serving as your host today. Pleasure.
Let's give Art a round of applause, please. And yes, thank you so much, Art. I want to give a big thank you, especially to Rebecca back there and all of the Romans 8 team that have continuing to bring worship to us and bring this event to us. And we would be nowhere, we wouldn't have had this event today if it weren't for not the team that has brought this together. So you've seen Carol Emmons at home on the screen, is with you on Zoom. We have Paulette Rogers-Gumbus over here brought into the space. We have Josh Dunlop, who's been helping us out on technology up front. I don't know if you can see him. In the back are our men holding down the fort. We have Harrison Nagasa and Alvar Jemez have also been a wonderful part to this team. And also thank you, Pastor Harry, for all of your guidance and journey along this way to get us to this point. One note, we do have a feedback survey for this event online. It's on our it's on the website if you go to the page of the event. We'd love to hear what you thought of this event. And there's also some spaces in there to comment about both what you would like to see more from this series of Civil Rights Then and Now, how we want to hear your feedback about what our future events could look like still in the coming months. And we'll include those in our planning as much as we can. And also there's a space for visioning yourself. If you feel called and have a vision that you want to share with, I think First Immanuel should really be involved with this, or I could see us active and making a difference in our community in this way. There's a space to share some feedback about that as well. Once again, this is recorded, so it will be available, and we encourage you, once we get it up on the website and hopefully social media, to share it with your friends and your family and community to continue to get out the wonderful testimony that was shared today. And we don't have an official date yet, but I've already mentioned we will have more events on the theme of civil rights then and now coming up in the coming months. We may have one as soon as the week before Palm Sunday here in March, but it might be coming into April. The team has not gotten the date solidified yet, but keep your eye out for announcements and social media posts in your email for more information about future events. The last thing that I want to do is something that one of the members actually touched on that I had in mind, but he brought it up. Today, among our celebrations of Black History Month and so many other things, is also George Manning's birthday today. And so, yeah, let's clap, yay. We're not really supposed to sing together in this space, but I would really love if everyone on the Zoom feed could unmute yourselves. It's going to sound like a cacophony in here. It's going to be a little wild, but I think it would be beautiful. And if you would all unmute yourself, and then we will hear you singing to George here in this space. And I will also sing here on the microphone. It's going to be ugly, George. You have such a great taste for music, but I hope this is good. So, on the count of 3, we'll start singing. 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
George.
Happy
Happy birthday to
And
you.
many more.
Many more. Happy birthday, George. And many
George, you
more,
looked like you were going to say something.
Happy birthday, George.
This is my birthday song. This is my birthday song. It isn't very long.
Amen. And with that, everyone, folks at home, I just invite you to go in peace, serve the Lord. Thank you so much for being with us, and a big thanks to everyone else here once again. Take care
honey,
and be well and be safe.
I just found out a new thing. Come here, dear. Come on.
Thank you.